एंड हमको ऑलरेडी दिख रहा है. फॉर एग्जांपल देयर आर टू कंपनीज, लार्ज कंपनीज, लीडर्स इन द आईटी सेक्टर, जिन्होंने अभी क्वार्टर 4 का रिजल्ट अनाउंस किया है फॉर FY23, एंड बोथ ऑफ देम हैव रिपोर्टेड लोअर देन नॉर्मल ग्रोथ. सो इम्पैक्ट दिखने लगा है. जो बिजनेसेस एक्सपोर्ट डिपेंडेंट हैं, स्पेशली टू द यूएस, उस उन बिजनेसेस पे थोड़ा इम्पैक्ट तो आना आना पड़ेगा, और या आएगा भी. जो कि हमको दिखने लगा है. एक दूसरा पॉइंटर मैं दे सकता हूँ, दैट एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ आउट ऑफ इंडिया, विच इज़ मैन्युफैक्चर्ड एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ आउट ऑफ इंडिया, उसमें भी ग्रोथ लेवल्स थोड़े कम होने लगे हैं. दो ये पूरा यूएस डिपेंडेंट नहीं है, इट इज़ अ वर्ल्ड एक्सपोर्ट फ्रॉम इंडिया, बट उसमें भी आपको ग्रोथ नंबर्स में थोड़ा कम दिखने लगा है. सो इट इज़ इम्पैक्टिंग. इट इज़ अर्ली डेज, बट शुरुआत हो गई है. So, which means from an one economy perspective and from an equity market perspective, since I represent Tata Mutual Fund, I would say that choice of business for your portfolio is very important. आप क्या कौन से बिजनेस लेते हैं आपके पोर्टफोलियो में, टू benefit from this trend is very important. So be, but the interesting thing is, जब हम लोग इन्वेस्टर्स से मिलते हैं, एंड आपका व्यू भी यही होगा होपफुली, या हम हमारे पार्टनर्स से मिलते हैं जो इन टर्न इन्वेस्टर्स को एजुकेट करते हैं, जैसे आप लोग हैं, ग्रो एज अ टीम है. हमारा ऐसा हमको ये फीडबैक मिलता है कि दिस टाइम अराउंड, इवन दो पिछले 18 महीने से मार्केट्स हैव बीन वेरी फ्लैट, रेंज बाउंड, this time around investors are taking a long term view, and actually positivity for the economy, outlook towards the economy and businesses in India is quite strong. In fact, it all flows from what you see, what you hear, what you do on a daily basis. For example, our real estate cycle is picking up, our banking sector is starting to do well, corporate India capex kar raha hai, government capex kar raha hai, job creation is happening. So when all around you, when you see positivity, your sentiment for any asset class, including real estate, including equity as an asset class, including fixed income, what you observe is that it helps in investments, and that is what we are seeing. So I think it's a good sign, it is continuing. एंड मुझे, मेरा ऐसा मानना है, मैं जब इन्वेस्टर से मिलता हूँ, मेरा ऐसा फीडबैक है कि मुझे लगता है ये कंटिन्यू रह सकता है. मेरे नज़रिए में, एटलीस्ट फ्रॉम टाटा म्यूचुअल फंड पर्सपेक्टिव, आई कैन फर्स्ट से दिस इज दैट हम लोग 1,000 करोड़ या 1,000 करोड़ मार्केट कैप से नीचे इन्वेस्ट जनरली अवॉइड करते हैं. सो 1,000 करोड़ से 17,000 करोड़ का मार्केट कैप जो बैंड है, which is the real small cap definition for us.
Sure.
And these are not small companies. Just to put things in perspective, on an average, let's say the fund that I manage, which is Tata Small Cap Fund,
Yeah.
the average market cap in that fund would be more than 7,000 crore. So these are very decent sized companies. Average profit after tax for companies in this universe, 1,000 crore and 17,000 crore market cap. There are more than 700 companies, first of all, to choose from. And average profit after tax would be, let's say, 150 crore plus on an annual basis. So these are very decent size companies.
Sure.
मुझे भी ऐसा लगता है कि size matters. For any given market environment, let's say आज का market environment is average, let's say our market cap average would be 6 to 8,000 crore in size.
Yeah.
For that average market cap, there is a specific AUM that makes sense for you. जैसे ही ये मार्केट कैप रेंज बढ़ता है, तो आपका यूएम भी बढ़ सकता है.
Yeah.
फॉर यू टू परफॉर्म कंसिस्टेंटली एंड डूइंग, सी उसमें चैलेंजेस ये होते हैं, एंड आई विल गिव यू द रिस्क. यू कैन बाय, इफ यू, लेट्स से इफ यू लाइक अ कंपनी, आपने उसके शेयर खरीद लिए फंड में.
Yeah.
जब तक वो कंपनी अच्छा कर रहा है तब तक आप अच्छा करेंगे. बट जब आपको उस कंपनी का शेयर बेचना हो मार्केट में, एंड इफ इट इज द illiquid counter, which most of the time small caps are
Small caps
illiquid.
are, yeah.
If you own a very large part of that company, let's say if you own more than 5% of the equity capital of that company, बेचना इतना easy नहीं होता है. So size, which is where size matters. So from a risk perspective, your risk increases if you own more of percentage of a company in a larger AUM. But my personal opinion, and I am not an NPS expert, so please take advice from our NPS team for sure. But my personal view is that both NPS and mutual funds play a role. Some allocation, you can obviously decide how much you want to, or how. So in NPS, you have a flexibility of shifting from equity to fixed income as well, as you can get in mutual funds. So an NPS makes sense, but I think mutual funds should have a larger proportion as of today. Children's fund is a name given to a diversified fund,
Sure.
uh, which is that generally होता ये है that investors think long term when they start investing. But I have seen times when they stop SIPs as well, और या कभी कभी कुछ ज़मीन खरीदना हो या घर में
Yeah.
कुछ बड़ा यूज आना हो पैसे का, तो you also redeem your funds from
Yeah.
your equity investments. To avoid that, uh, the industry created a children's fund category with the name itself children. So when नाम बच्चों का आ जाता है तो जनरली इन्वेस्टर सोचता है कि ये तो बच्चे के लिए पैसा डाला है तो इसको नहीं
नहीं
निकालेंगे.
निकालेंगे, हाँ.
So in a normal, in a practical basis, it's a normal diversified fund with a long term orientation, where the fund manager is investing on your behalf into large, mid, small, everywhere, wherever you find opportunity. It's a diversified fund. It's a good diversified category. uh, the perception, when the name children's comes, then it creates a positive perception in the mind of investor that बच्चों के लिए डाला है तो 20-25 साल से पहले तो निकालना नहीं.
Sure.
And hence it becomes a very long term investment vehicle for an investor, and that is what a good thing about. So it's in that sense it's a good branding that funds have done, but behind that branding it's a normal diversified fund. Investors, in fact, they are doing the right thing already, is that invest through SIP
Yeah.
and take a very long term view. And I would just repeat this. I think we are already seeing it happening, and I think it should continue. Don't try and be greedy in terms of doing taking leverage and investing. So one thing that I notice, and SEBI recently has come out with that circular as well, or that data point they came out with, is that we find most investors are trying to use derivatives to make trading gains. And we all know from data that 70 or 90% plus of traders don't make money. In fact,
Yeah.
they lose money as per the latest data that we have from SEBI. So don't try to trade. Look at long term. Look at investing through SIP. Look at 10 years plus as an investment horizon. And I think you will not be disappointed from equity.
हाय एवरीवन, मेरा नाम नम्रता अरोरा है एंड वेलकम बैक टू म्यूचुअल फंड्स की बात. जैसे आप सब जानते हैं कि म्यूचुअल फंड्स की बात में हम ग्लोबल और इंडियन इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस, कमोडिटीज, स्टॉक मार्केट एंड ऑफ कोर्स म्यूचुअल फंड्स की बात करते हैं. और हर एपिसोड में वी हैव समवन वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, समवन विद अ लॉट ऑफ नॉलेज, हु जॉइंस अस एंड आंसर्स ऑल आवर क्वेश्चंस. तो आज भी हमारे साथ वी हैव समवन वेरी स्पेशल. टुडे वी हैव विद अस अ वेरी renowned personality across the mutual fund industry, Mr. Chandraprakash Padiyar, who joined Tata Asset Management Company as a senior fund manager in September 2018. Mr. Chandraprakash पहले Alchemy Capital Management Private Limited के साथ भी काम कर चुके हैं as portfolio manager for the onshore long-only strategies. Mr. Chandraprakash has over 22 years of experience in research and fund management. He began his career in equity research and analysis at UTI Mutual Fund and in time was designated the fund manager overseeing the mutual fund schemes. Mr. Chandraprakash is an MBA in finance from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, which is affiliated to the University of Pune, and he has also cleared all 3 levels of CFA program from the CFA Institute, USA. Hello everyone and welcome back to Mutual Funds की बात. Thank you so much for joining us today. And आज हमारे साथ हैं Mr. Chandraprakash, who is from Tata Mutual Fund. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. And let's start with the questions. So I think सबसे पहले हम सब ये जानना चाहेंगे कि अगर हम देखें तो इकोनॉमिक परफॉर्मेंस पिछले एक साल में फॉर इक्विटी मार्केट एक बहुत बड़ा पेन पॉइंट रहा है. One of the recession indicators is yield curve, and this inverted a couple of months back. The global economy has definitely slowed down in the last compared to last 1 year. काफ़ी जो economies हैं around the world, they are showing some signs of economic slowdown, and in the past, similar market stress and inflation numbers have really foreshadowed a global recession. तो आपको क्या लगता है कि इसकी वजह से इंडियन इकोनॉमी पे क्या इम्पैक्ट होने वाला है?
Well, let me start with and thank you so much, Namrata, first of all, to have me on the show. Let me start with the good news, which is that in India, uh, FY23 GDP growth is somewhere around 6.8%, and RBI projects that FY24, which is the year that we have just started, उसमें भी जीडीपी ग्रोथ करीब करीब 6 से 6.5, एटलीस्ट आरबीआई ने 6.5 प्रोजेक्ट किया है. देर आर सम इकोनॉमिस्ट हु से 5.5%,
Sure.
but let's say between 5.5 to 6.5% we will see our economy growing. Now आपने एक बड़ा important point raise किया है, which is yield curve. US economy में US yield curves have are actually uh, the longer yield is lower than the shorter yield, because वहाँ पे US फेड ने बड़ी तेज़ी से रेट बढ़ाया है. एंड जब भी आप इतने तेज़ी से रेट बढ़ाते हैं तो उसका एक एटलीस्ट इकोनॉमिस्ट और द एक्सपर्ट्स स्टार्ट बिलीविंग दैट उसका इम्पैक्ट इकोनॉमी में आएगा.
Mm.
डिमांड कम होती है. इनफैक्ट द वन ऑफ द important pointers, US Fed itself is saying that उनका objective of raising rates is to reduce growth, increase unemployment, and hence reduce inflation.
Mm.
So actually, their motive is to increase unemployment, which is at close to all-time lows levels. Uh, so naturally, economy पे impact आएगा. And हम लोगों को यह सोचना चाहिए. So for example, World Bank in their estimate for CY23 for US is already projecting a growth falling from, let's say, 3% plus to less than 1.5% for US. हालांकि yield curve is suggesting that there will be a mild recession in CY23, but we'll have to see. Early days, but मैं शुरुआत जहाँ से किया था that India is stable. So आपका एक दूसरा क्वेश्चन था कि उससे इंडिया पे क्या फर्क पड़ सकता है. So India में there are some businesses, like for example software companies out of India. Close to 35-40% of their business is from the US, and customers in the US. And हमको already दिख रहा है. For example, there are two companies, large companies, leaders in the IT sector, जिन्होंने अभी Q4 का result announce किया है for FY23, and both of them have reported lower than normal growth. सो इम्पैक्ट दिखने लगा है. जो बिजनेसेस एक्सपोर्ट डिपेंडेंट हैं, स्पेशली टू द यूएस,
Mhm.
उस उन बिजनेसेस पे थोड़ा इम्पैक्ट तो आना आना पड़ेगा और या आएगा भी. जो कि हमको दिखने लगा है. एक दूसरा पॉइंटर मैं दे सकता हूँ दैट एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ आउट ऑफ इंडिया, विच इज़ मैन्युफैक्चर्ड एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ आउट ऑफ इंडिया, उसमें भी ग्रोथ लेवल्स थोड़े कम होने लगे हैं. दो ये पूरा यूएस डिपेंडेंट नहीं है, इट इज़ अ वर्ल्ड एक्सपोर्ट फ्रॉम इंडिया, बट उसमें भी आपको ग्रोथ नंबर्स में थोड़ा कम दिखने लगा है. सो इट इज़ इम्पैक्टिंग. इट इज़ अर्ली डेज बट शुरुआत हो गई है. So, which means from an one economy perspective and from an equity market perspective, since I represent Tata Mutual Fund, I would say that choice of business for your portfolio is very important. आप क्या कौन से business लेते हैं आपके portfolio में to benefit from this trend is very important. So be very choosy.
Okay, fair enough. So we do have, we will see some more changes happening, or in the near future. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I think in सबकी वजह से, come to look at it, discretionary spending by consumers वो slow down हो रहा है या होगा, and interest rates are obviously going up, which is bringing down the inflation. तो इंडिया का जो इन्फ्लेशन है, that's dropped to a 15-month low of 5.66% in the month of March. And आपको क्या लगता है कि जो आरबीआई जो टारगेट कर रहा है इन्फ्लेशन को, कैन इट हेल्प द इंडियन स्टॉक मार्केट बाउंस बैक? और इट्स नॉट जस्ट फॉर रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन, अगर देखें तो डब्ल्यूपीआई नंबर वो आल्सो एट इट्स लोएस्ट सिंस लास्ट ईयर और सो. तो इसका आपको इसकी वजह से आपको क्या लगता है कि इंडियन स्टॉक मार्केट्स पे क्या इम्पैक्ट होने वाला है?
So, मैं शुरू so I would want to give credit to the government and the RBI on this, which is that मुझे लगता है their policies over the last few years and especially this year are quite balanced. And the reason I say this is that हमारे economy, we are a current account deficit economy, which means that we import more, we export
राइट.
less. तो क्योंकि हम कम एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं रिलेटिव टू आर इम्पोर्ट्स, तो हमको हर साल वी आर डिपेंड एज एन इकोनॉमी वी आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन फॉरेन फ्लोज.
Sure.
अगर हमारी इकोनॉमी में ज़्यादा ग्रोथ हो जाए किसी साल में, जो कि आपने शायद से अगर आपको याद हो 2009 से 13 में
Yeah.
आर इकोनॉमी वाज ग्रोइंग फास्टर, बट बिकॉज वी वर टू मच डिपेंडेंट ऑन इम्पोर्ट्स हम लोग ज़्यादा इम्पोर्ट करने लगे.
Hmm.
And because we imported more, it put pressure on our current account deficit situation, which mean that हम लोग और ज़्यादा dependent हो गए foreign flows पे.
Sure.
और एक साल ऐसा आया जहाँ, and the reason, since you import more, आपका inflation और बढ़ता है.
Mm.
So you should never have a situation जहाँ पे आपका economy unusually ज़्यादा strong हो.
Mm.
In an environment where global growth slow है, I think it makes sense to balance your economy in a manner that ना तो ज़्यादा तेजी हो ना बहुत मंदी हो जाए.
Okay.
तो पिछले एक साल में आई थिंक द आरबीआई हैज बीन रेजिंग रेट्स. Government, on the other hand, has been spending money on capital goods, which is infrastructure investment, which creates assets, not giving free money to the population.
Yeah.
And subsidy levels कम हो गए हैं, and that has meant that growth levels थोड़े कम हुए हैं, but inflation is also under control.
Right.
It is also meant that हमारा trade deficit is reducing gradually. uh, let's say between Jan and March of this year, trade deficit is quite low at around less than 2% of GDP actually, which was more than 3% in FY23. So all of these things make me believe that we are in a good shape. Our regulators and the government, दोनों की policies have been pretty stable, which ultimately means that long term it is good for economy and good for the markets. So
Yeah.
to answer your question, मुझे लगता है हाँ, मुझे लगता है we are in a strong space. Uh, Most likely in this environment, India can actually stand out both from a growth perspective. We are one of the fastest growing economy in the world.
Yeah.
uh, at the same time, our currency can be very stable, and that's a good sign.
Wow. Okay. So it's a good sign then. I don't think we have that much to worry about. तो अगर एस आई पीज की बात करी जाए सो द एस आई पी कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन फॉर मार्च वॉज अराउंड 14,276 crores compared to 13,600 odd crores in Feb. And देखा जाए तो this was probably the highest where SIPs had topped the 14,000 crore mark for the first time ever. तो आपको क्या लगता है कि जो रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स हैं क्या वो फाइनली आर दे अंडरस्टैंडिंग द इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ SIP and can this trend really stay?
Well, first of all, amazing it is, nahi? In the sense that every month we are nowadays seeing either steady number or increasing.
Yeah.
And as you rightly pointed out, we just saw closer to 15,000 crore in a month on SIP. So, but the interesting thing is जब हम लोग इन्वेस्टर्स से मिलते हैं, एंड आपका व्यू भी यही होगा होपफुली, या हम हमारे पार्टनर्स से मिलते हैं जो इन टर्न इन्वेस्टर्स को
Yeah.
एजुकेट करते हैं, जैसे आप लोग हैं, ग्रो एज अ टीम है. uh, हमारा ऐसा हमको ये फीडबैक मिलता है कि दिस टाइम अराउंड, इवन दो पिछले 18 महीने से मार्केट्स हैव बीन वेरी फ्लैट, रेंज बाउंड, uh, this time around investors are taking a long term view, and actually positivity for the economy, outlook towards the economy and businesses in India is quite strong. In fact, it all flows from what you see, what you hear, what you do on a daily basis. For example, our real estate cycle is picking up, our
Yeah.
banking sector is starting to do well, corporate India capex कर रहा है, government capex कर रहा है, job creation is happening. So when all around you, when you see positivity, your sentiment for any asset class, including real estate, including equity as an asset class, including fixed income, what you observe is that it helps in investments, and that is what we are seeing. So I think it's a good sign, it is continuing. एंड मुझे मेरा ऐसा मानना है, मैं जब इन्वेस्टर से मिलता हूँ, मेरा ऐसा फीडबैक है कि मुझे लगता है ये कंटिन्यू रह सकता है. एंड द अदर थिंग दैट यू मस्ट नोट, though you've not asked me this, is that increasingly domestic money is, or the share of domestic institutional investors relative to FII investors is almost like matching,
Yeah.
which means that we are no more depend, at least from an equity market perspective, we are
No,
no more too
dependent
much
on
dependent on FII flows, and that's a very good sign again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even when we meet, a lot of investors, which we meet on a very, very regular basis, I think SIP एक ऐसी चीज़ है जो हर investor जिसके बारे में जानता है, and every investor, I see a lot of people now just having their SIP investments, right, which is great,
Yeah.
and that's what is getting reflected in the numbers as well. So which like you rightly said is pretty awesome. Okay. अब अगर हम थोड़ा स्मॉल कैप की बात करें, सो अभी जो स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स में रिसेंटली वी सॉ सिग्निफिकेंट ड्रॉप, लेकिन फिर भी देखा जाए तो काफ़ी इन्वेस्टर्स अभी भी स्मॉल कैप को लेके काफ़ी ऑप्टिमिस्टिक हैं. Investors are obviously investing in small cap funds during the market downturn क्योंकि उनको anticipation है कि better returns मिलेंगे. So can we say, looking at this trend, कि जो Indian investors हैं, they're getting more matured considering, looking at this trend. And just one more question in addition to this, कि जो स्मॉल कैप फंड का जो एयूएम होता है, डज इट रियली मेक अ लॉट ऑफ डिफरेंस? क्योंकि दिस अ थियोरी कि इट इज बेटर फॉर स्मॉल कैप फंड्स टू हैव लोअर और मिड साइज्ड एयूएम्स. एंड इसीलिए हमने देखा था कि बहुत सारे मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप फंड्स ने दे हैड स्टॉप्ड वन टाइम इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इन द पास्ट. So what is your view on this as well, along with the previous question that I asked you?
Sure. Thank you for this. I so first of all on एक मेरे नज़रिए में एटलीस्ट फ्रॉम टाटा म्यूचुअल फंड पर्सपेक्टिव आई कैन फर्स्ट से दिस इज दैट हम लोग 1,000 करोड़ या 1,000 करोड़ मार्केट कैप से नीचे इन्वेस्ट जनरली अवॉइड करते हैं. सो 1,000 करोड़ से 17,000 करोड़ का मार्केट कैप जो बैंड है, which is the real small cap definition for us.
Sure.
And these are not small companies. Just to put things in perspective, on an average, let's say the fund that I manage, which is Tata Small Cap Fund,
Yeah.
the average market cap in that fund would be more than 7,000 crore. So these are very decent sized companies. Average profit after tax for companies in this universe, 1,000 crore and 17,000 crore market cap. There are more than 700 companies, first of all, to choose from. And average profit after tax would be, let's say, 150 crore plus on an annual basis. So these are very decent sized companies.
Sure.
Uh, एक ज़माना था 2008 से पहले का, जहाँ पे स्मॉल कैप यूज टू बी कंपनीज बिलो 500 करोड़
Yeah.
मार्केट कैप, एंड प्रॉफिट्स 10-20 करोड़ से ज़्यादा बहुत मुश्किल से मिलता था. एंड उम्मीद ऐसी थी कि ये कंपनीज बड़े हो जाएंगे एंड हेंस इन्वेस्टर्स उस सेगमेंट में पैसा डालते थे.
Yeah.
बट ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम वी ऑल रियलाइज्ड दैट उस सेगमेंट में volatility in stock price is very high, and ultimately sustainability of return was not very simple or not easy. Whereas today's small cap is very different. This definition came about in 2018, SEBI along with AMFI. And nowadays, AMFI comes up with a 6-month list defining what is a large cap, mid cap, small cap in the market. And today, a small cap start from 17,000 crore and below, and we don't invest below 1,000 crore. So that's one perspective that I thought I'll give. The other thing that you should, and now coming to why people should invest in small caps, और या पिछले 4 साल से एज यू हैव नोटिस स्मॉल कैप्स ने काफ़ी अच्छा एज अ फंड कैटेगरी ने पिछले 4-4.5 साल में अच्छा रिटर्न दिया इन्वेस्टर्स को, एंड उस रिटर्न को देख के इन्वेस्टर्स शायद से और पैसा डाल रहे हैं. मुझे ऐसा लगता है. सो इफ़ यू लुक एट द कंपनीज बिटवीन 1,000 करोड़ एंड 17,000 करोड़ मार्केट कैप, एंड एज आई सेड 700 कंपनीज से ज़्यादा कंपनीज हैं उसमें. A very large part of this universe of companies are into manufacturing and logistics.
Okay.
And जो आज दुनिया में जो चेंजेस दिख रहे हैं हमको, बोथ जियोपॉलिटिक्स एंड कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस इन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इन इंडिया. सो बिफोर 2016 इंडियन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग वाज लिमिटेड टू अ फ्यू सेक्टर्स. 2016 के बाद से हमको दिख रहा है बहुत सारे नए सेक्टर्स में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इंडिया में शिफ्ट हो रहा है. वो इसलिए हो रहा है क्योंकि रिलेटिव टू लेट्स से चाइना, इंडिया में लेबर कॉस्ट इज मच 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 चीप. इनफैक्ट आई जस्ट रिमेंबर्ड BCG स्टडी विच केम आउट a few months back, and उस BCG स्टडी में it was mentioned that relative to China, India labor cost is 1/3, which is 30% of what China labor cost is for a manufacturing organization. So that's the extent of, so which is we are seeing this shift. It's a very gradual shift. ऐसा नहीं कि overnight everything is shifting to lower cost locations like India, but वो shift शुरू हुआ है. And because of that, जो ये and since पहले नहीं होता था, तो ये सारी कंपनी छोटी थी साइज में. अब मैन्युफैक्चरिंग शिफ्ट जो हो रहा है, बोथ इंडिजनाइजेशन विच इज़ हमारे देश के कंजम्पशन के लिए हम खुद ही मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हैं अपने लिए, एंड एक्सपोर्ट के लिए हम मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हैं. सो बोथ इंटरनल एंड एक्सटर्नल दिस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग शिफ्ट दैट इज हैपनिंग it is benefiting small cap businesses the most, because that is where manufacturing is in a larger manner for B2B,
Okay.
which is business to business manufacturing जिसको कहते हैं. uh, and hence small cap companies have benefited, stock price of small cap segment of the market has benefited.
Mm-hmm.
मुझे ऐसा लगता है this trend can go on for the next 5-10 years as well. So if you choose, ultimately you have to choose the right business. Not all small cap companies will do well. We all know this. So you have to choose the right business. You have to bet on the right promoter. You have to bet the right balance sheet, who can invest on their own without depending on the market. So if you do a right analysis, if you do right homework on what kind of businesses that you want to buy, मुझे ऐसा लगता है small caps में valuations are reasonable and there is enough opportunity for growth in profitability. So I believe that the next 5-7 years could be still a good period of returns in the small cap segment.
Okay. Okay. So which means the investors जिन्होंने already इसमें invest किया हुआ है, they can continue to hold on to their investments in small cap space.
Yeah. So the other previous question that we started with, SIPs can continue.
IPs can continue. But how about the AUM? Like, can we say confidently ये theory is it true कि जो mid cap funds या फिर जो small cap funds होते हैं उसमें जितना कम AUM होता है उतना better रहता है fund के लिए? Do you think the theory is valid?
It is valid, but let me with a caveat. For example, हमने टाटा स्मॉल कैप फंड 2018 अक्टूबर में लॉन्च किया था.
Right.
And when we launched the fund, we got 180 crore
Hmm.
to start with. And उस टाइम पे the 251st company, which is where small caps used to start from,
Yeah.
used to have a market cap of 6,100 crore approximately, around 6,000 crore.
Sure.
पिछले 4.5 साल में that same 251st company has gone to 17,000, 16,000 plus crore.
Yeah.
So market has gone up by 2.5 times
Hmm.
from a liquidity or size perspective.
Size perspective. Huh.
And the Tata Small Cap Fund AUM has gone to, let's say, 3,600 crore.
Sure.
So AUM of Small Cap Fund has also gone up. All small cap funds have gone up. We have also benefited in that sense, and we have performed well. And at the same time, market has also increased or expanded in terms of breadth and size. So this definition needs to be flexible. Having said this, I would agree with your view. मुझे भी ऐसा लगता है कि size matters. For any given market environment, let's say आज का market environment is average. Let's say our market cap average would be 6 to 8,000 crore in size.
Yeah.
For that average market cap, there is a specific AUM that makes sense for you.
Hmm.
जैसे ही ये मार्केट कैप रेंज बढ़ता है तो आपका यूएम भी बढ़ सकता है.
Yeah.
फॉर यू टू परफॉर्म कंसिस्टेंटली एंड डूइंग, सी उसमें चैलेंजेस ये होते हैं, एंड आई विल गिव यू द रिस्क. यू कैन बाय, इफ यू लेट्स से इफ यू लाइक अ कंपनी, आपने उसके शेयर खरीद लिए फंड में.
Yeah.
जब तक वो कंपनी अच्छा कर रहा है तब तक आप अच्छा करेंगे. बट जब आपको उस कंपनी का शेयर बेचना हो मार्केट में, एंड इफ इट इज द illiquid counter, which most of the time small caps are
Small caps
illiquid.
are. Yeah.
If you own a very large part of that company, let's say if you own more than 5% of the equity capital of that company, बेचना इतना easy नहीं होता है.
Hmm.
So size, which is where size matters. So
Yeah.
from a risk perspective, your risk increases if you own more of percentage of a company in a larger AUM.
Sure.
So, but this definition will change over a period of time as and when market cap of the segment itself changes. But it does matter.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So now let's quickly talk, a little bit about contra funds. तो आपके ओपिनियन में जो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स होते हैं, विच टाइप ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स कुड लुक एट फंड्स एंड जो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स होते हैं, एक तो पहले हमें ये बताइए कि कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स होते क्या हैं फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ आवर इन्वेस्टर्स, एंड ऑल्सो किस तरीके के इन्वेस्टर्स को इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए एंड हाउ लॉन्ग शुड दे इन्वेस्ट इन कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स. और ये जो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स होते हैं, कैन दे रियली बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द कोर पोर्टफोलियो या फिर सैटेलाइट पोर्टफोलियो का हिस्सा होना चाहिए फॉर एन इन्वेस्टर?
So contra funds by definition, by name itself, contra means that जो market में आज नहीं चल रहा है वो आप लोगे.
करेक्ट.
And which basically means that आपको ये उम्मीद है that ये business में problem नहीं है, market उसको ठीक से value नहीं कर रहा है. In many ways you can call them value funds also. They are not true value fund, but by definition, आज की तारीख में जो business परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा है, सस्ता है फॉर सम रीजन, अगर उसमें बिजनेस फंडामेंटल्स है तो अ कॉन्ट्रा फंड मैनेजर कैन बाय दैट बिजनेस एंड वेट फॉर द टर्न अराउंड इन दैट बिजनेस, और उसमें आप पैसा कमा सकते हो बिकॉज द वैल्यू ऑफ दैट बिजनेस कैन ग्रो. दैट इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ अ कॉन्ट्रा फंड. Well, to answer your second part of the question, मेरे हिसाब से it's a it's a very long term orientation that an investor should have,
Mhm.
because generally speaking, it takes a full cycle for a contra fund to do well. Meaning that आज किसी business किसी sector का अगर let's say oil and gas as a sector, let's
Mhm.
take it that as an example today. Oil and gas companies are suffering because crude prices have gone up, and government has there is this price control on petrol and diesel prices in India, uh, and there is this windfall tax also on refining business. So oil and gas as a business, as a sector, is not doing well from a stock perspective.
Yeah.
But inherently उसमें उन businesses में value है. सो अगर आज मैं अगर मेरे पास अगर कॉन्ट्रा फंड होता तो मैं वो सेक्टर उस कॉन्ट्रा फंड में इन्वेस्ट करता, with the hope that there will come a time when either the crude price comes down
Mhm.
or petrol diesel prices are deregulated or this windfall tax goes away.
Mhm.
The moment that happens, profitability for those businesses goes up
Mhm.
and value of those businesses go up. But उसके लिए patience चाहिए. उसके लिए sometimes it takes 10 years, sometimes maybe 5 years, sometimes even 1 year. So, but 1 year is luck.
Mhm.
Most of the time it takes between 5 to 10 years. So it's a very long term horizon जो आपको investor को देना पड़ता है. And lastly, what proportion of your investment should be in contra fund? Well, I would suggest these are very high risk and relatively higher reward kind of a concept funds. So logically, every investor first of all needs to have a different asset allocation. So usme it will play a different role. But generally speaking, I would not advise a very large part of the portfolio in such funds. It there is a role for such funds, but very small proportion of their AUM.
So definitely not part of the core portfolio.
Definitely not part of the core portfolio.
Okay. And I think a good amount of foresight also would help, right? I mean, अगर आप contra funds में डाल रहे हैं तो foresight होना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि you have so much faith in that business even though the market is not really having or showing that kind of faith. So
True. That's true. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, yeah, okay. So let's talk a little bit about goal based investing. ये बोला जाता है कि एज एन इन्वेस्टर अगर आपके गोल्स हैं एंड इफ यू आर investing for the long term, then obviously you need to have more focus towards your goals. तो आपके perspective में when we talk about NPS as an investment, national pension scheme, for from a retirement point of view, वो कैसा इन्वेस्टमेंट है कंसिडरिंग अभी इक्विटी फंड्स में इतने सारे ऑप्शंस अवेलेबल हैं. टुडे वी हैव अ लॉट ऑफ ऑप्शंस अवेलेबल फॉर जस्ट फ्रॉम अ रिटायरमेंट पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, राइट? ऑल्सो अगर देखा जाए तो जो इक्विटी फंड्स होते हैं उसमें से आप पैसा बहुत आसानी से निकाल सकते हैं. रिडेम्पशन इज वेरी इजी, राइट? कंसिडरिंग there's an NPS में तो we have lock-ins and stuff like that. आप retirement से पहले you can't take out a reasonable chunk of your investments. So for an investor who's looking at building a retirement corpus, आप क्या recommend करेंगे? Do you think NPS as an investment works, or do you think equity में invest करना चाहिए even though they'll be able to take it out very easily? तो शायद वो long term vision उतना maintain कर पाए कोई investor या नहीं कर पाए, you never know.
So there are two things that I would mention. One is which I would add to what you said on NPS. The benefits of NPS is that there is a very good tax advantage that you can get if you invest through NPS.
Yeah,
At least if you do a corporate NPS, for example, 10% of your basic you can save tax,
right,
or 50,000 rupees a year you save tax.
correct.
That tax advantage is huge, actually, very large. एंड हेंस अप टू दैट अमाउंट जो आप साल में कमाते हैं, उतना तो आपको डालना ही चाहिए. एंड बिकॉज इट एड्स टू योर लॉन्ग टर्म रिटायरमेंट प्लानिंग फॉर श्योर, गोल बेस्ड जो आपने बताया. सो एन पी एस वन शुड पुट, एंड उतना तो डालना ही चाहिए, विच इज 50,000 if you're not doing a corporate pension, and if
Yeah,
you're doing a corporate pension, then direct through corporate, 10% of your basic should be put
yeah,
on an annualized basis. On the other hand, I think there is certainly a role. To that extent, there is a limited role that a NPS can play because it is also very long term in nature. Uh, the ease of exiting is not so great. Uh, so, a large part, I would still say, uh, can continue or should continue towards mutual funds, and some decent proportion, at least up to the tax benefit that you get, and slightly more if you like, can certainly go to NPS. NPS also has another advantage, which you can think about, which is very low fees.
Yeah.
So the cost structure for an NPS is quite low relative to a mutual fund. But there are pluses and minuses of both sides, and but my personal opinion, and I am not an NPS expert, so please take advice from our NPS team for sure. Uh, but my personal view is that both NPS and mutual funds play a role. Some allocation, you can obviously decide how much you want to, or how. So in NPS you have a flexibility of shifting from equity to fixed income as well as you can get in mutual funds. So an NPS makes sense, but I think mutual funds should have a larger proportion as of today.
Sure. So, which means it's not really about NPS or equity funds. It's a combination of the two that's going to help the investor.
Yeah, ultimately आप equity as an asset class choose कर रहे हो.
Yeah.
So whichever can give you better performance over
Yeah.
long period of time
Yeah.
should have a larger allocation.
Sure. Fair enough. Okay. I think just going back to mid and small cap funds that we were talking about, हम सबको पता है कि mid and small cap as a category is has higher volatility, right? जो losses होते हैं, they are relatively higher during bearish markets, or when the markets are a little more volatile compared to the large and mid cap space when we're talking about small cap. तो आपके ओपिनियन में what should be the allocation of one's equity portfolio towards mid cap and small cap? तो मान लीजिए कि मुझे अपना equity portfolio अभी डिजाइन करना है, तो उसमें मेरा mid cap कितना होना चाहिए exposure, small cap में कितना exposure होना चाहिए, and how many funds should I have in the portfolio? क्योंकि generally क्या होता है कि जो बहुत सारे investors होते हैं, they tend to have multiple funds in these two categories in their portfolio. तो कितने फंड्स होने चाहिए और मेरी पोर्टफोलियो में कितना एलोकेशन मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप में होना चाहिए?
So I think this question is best answered by a wealth advisor like Grow itself. But I will at least attempt since you asked me this question. Uh, and my personal opinion is that first of all, I would divide mid cap and small cap separately.
Sure.
This is not one category.
Yeah.
Uh, Post 2018, where SEBI, MFI, as I said, I defined what is a large cap, mid cap, small cap. So now mid caps में वो 100 companies हैं, between 100 and first and 250 company in the market, and उसके नीचे सारा small cap है, उससे ऊपर
Large cap.
100 large cap है. So today, and since there are those 150 companies only in the mid cap space, and there is a large corpus chasing those 150 companies, my personal opinion is that valuations are relatively on the higher side, and hence relative return wise, um, I don't prefer them so much in my personal opinion. In Whereas small caps and large caps have relatively reasonable valuations,
Okay.
business growth potential wise is similar most in most cases relative to mid cap as well. So in my pecking order of, let's say, investment rates, risk reward, I think small caps and large caps are better, and
Okay.
mid caps are slightly relatively expensive. Having said this, uh, businesses are good. So large cap, mid cap, small cap, if you choose the right business, if आप अगर सही बिजनेस को चूज करके पोर्टफोलियो में लेते हैं तो पैसा बनाने का स्कोप तो सब जगह है.
Hmm.
And hence, if you take a longer term view, everything has a role to play in your portfolio. Uh, since today valuations in mid caps are relatively higher, maybe you allocate lesser today. Uh, and goal seeking, as you rightly mentioned in my previous question, ultimately depends on what goal each individual investor has.
Yeah.
Some people expect 10% return, are satisfied with 10% return. Some people expect 20% return. So depend, and the risk reward, the risk that you intend to take or ability of risk that you can withstand, will define how much allocation you can make to mid cap, small cap, large cap today. I think given the environment today, my recommendation would be to take higher allocation to small cap
Okay.
over mid cap, and large caps are always good for you to have in your portfolio.
But I think we can also confidently say that today's small caps would be tomorrow's mid caps and maybe future large caps at some point. And not all of them, but definitely some of them.
Yeah, some of them at least.
At
Yeah,
least some
yeah,
of
sure,
them. Not all for sure, but at least some of them for sure. तो अगर
yeah,
इसमें हमारा long term view है तो I don't see any harm in that, right?
sure, sure.
Sure. Okay. So I think एक जो बहुत interesting category of mutual funds है, which a lot of investors are very very excited about, is sectoral investing, right? A lot of investors like investing in different sectors, and I know कि इतने सारे जो investors के साथ मैं interact करती हूँ, I'm always asked questions on sectors. So अगर हम एक recent trend देखें, so there was a recent crash of the pharma sector, and more recently, of course, the IT sector, and we've all seen it, right? तो आप ऐसे इन्वेस्टर्स को क्या एडवाइस देंगे, स्पेशली व्हेन इट कम्स टू इन्वेस्टिंग इन स्पेसिफिक सेक्टर्स, और अगर वो इतना हेविली इन्वेस्टेड थे इन सेक्टर्स लाइक आईटी एंड फार्मा, सो उनका भी स्टैंड क्या होना चाहिए, एंड ऑल्सो हाउ डू वी अंडरस्टैंड विच इज द सेक्टर विच इज एक्सपेक्टेड टू परफॉर्म इन द फ्यूचर, हम हाउ कैन वी गेज द परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स?
So interesting question. Actually, every sector has its good times and bad times.
Yeah,
Uh, for example, you mentioned pharma and IT are today having slightly weaker times, but they had good years in the past.
yeah,
So unfortunately, what we've noticed is that इन्वेस्टर्स सेक्टरल फंड्स में पैसा डाल तो देते हैं, बट दे दे मिस एग्जिटिंग एट द राइट टाइम एज वेल.
yeah,
So what you need to do is, if you are investing a larger part of your corpus in only sector funds or dedicated sector fund, then your timing is also important, of entering at the right time and exiting also at the right time, or let's say reducing or increasing your allocation over a period of time, where you need a good wealth manager like Grow again to advise you in terms of when to enter, when to exit, or when to increase, when to reduce your exposure.
sure.
अगर आप वो नहीं कर सकते हो, so then logically pure sector fund mein, my advice would be to don't take too much exposure. It is like contra fund in many ways.
Hmm.
The example is the same, is that अगर आप बहुत ज़्यादा रिस्क लोगे रिवॉर्ड की उम्मीद में, so या तो आपके पास बहुत पेशेंस हो,
Yeah,
आप 10 साल 15 साल 20 साल के लिए रखें तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, बिकॉज साइकिल आएगा वापस.
correct.
बट अगर 2 3 4 साल का व्यू हो तो लॉजिकली एक्सपोजर कम रखना चाहिए, एंड अ डाइवर्सिफाइड फंड इज ऑलवेज बेटर टू चूज. इनफैक्ट हमने प्रीवियस क्वेश्चन में वी स्पोक मोर अबाउट स्मॉल कैप, मिड कैप, लार्ज कैप एज अ सेगमेंट, but actually the real allocation for any investor should be a diversified fund,
Diversified.
whether it's a flexi cap fund or a multi cap
Hmm.
fund or a large and mid cap fund or a balance fund or a balance advantage fund as a category. These are some, or retirement fund, these are funds to look for your long term allocation in a larger manner, and some part into dedicated small cap, mid cap, large cap, or sector funds or contra funds. That's how I would put it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, completely with you on that answer. I mean, sectoral funds definitely risk is on the higher side. तो या तो आप time कर पाओ या तो फिर बिल्कुल ही long term view हो, like you rightly said. So in your answer in the previous question, you spoke about say retirement oriented funds. So like these, we have a lot of solution oriented mutual funds which are available, and I think one such solution oriented fund is a children's fund. तो ये जो चिल्ड्रंस फंड होता है ये क्या होता है? कैन यू जस्ट थ्रो लिटिल लाइट ऑन दैट फॉर आवर व्यूअर्स? और आपके व्यू में क्या एक अच्छा ऑप्शन होता है फॉर पेरेंट्स हु आर लुकिंग टू इन्वेस्ट फॉर द चिल्ड्रंस हायर एजुकेशन और मैरिज और वट, तो क्या उनके लिए ये अच्छा इन्वेस्टमेंट माना जाता है, और देर आर अदर कैटेगरीज दैट दे कुड एक्सप्लोर इंस्टेड ऑफ अ चिल्ड्रंस फंड?
So, Amrita, you would know this is that children's fund is a name given to a diversified fund,
Sure.
uh, which is that generally होता ये है that investors think long term when they start investing. But I have seen times when they stop SIPs as well, और या कभी कभी कुछ ज़मीन खरीदना हो या घर में
Yeah.
कुछ बड़ा यूज़ आना हो पैसे का, तो you also redeem your funds from
Yeah.
your equity investments. To avoid that, uh, the industry created a children's fund category, with the name itself children. So when नाम बच्चों का आ जाता है तो जनरली इन्वेस्टर सोचता है कि ये तो बच्चे के लिए पैसा डाला है तो इसको नहीं
नहीं
निकालेंगे.
निकालेंगे हाँ.
So in a practical basis, it's a normal diversified fund with a long-term orientation, where the fund manager is investing on your behalf into large, mid, small, everywhere, wherever you find opportunity. It's a diversified fund. It's a good diversified category. uh, the perception when the name children's comes, then it creates a positive perception in the mind of investor that बच्चों के लिए डाला है तो 20-25 साल से पहले तो निकालना नहीं.
अच्छा.
And hence it becomes a very long term investment vehicle for an investor, and that is what a good thing about. So it's in that sense it's a good branding that funds have done, but behind that branding it's a normal diversified fund.
So you think it's more psychological,
It's more a psychological fund, like any other. So to answer your second part of the question, किसी भी diversified fund में अगर आप 20 साल 25 साल डालेंगे तो you will do well. You need not put only in a children's fund, but children's fund is a good category to invest.
बट आई रियली लाइक्ड व्हाट यू सेड कि अगर एक नॉर्मल डाइवर्सिफाइड फंड में आप डालोगे तो शायद आप निकाल पाओ, लेकिन चिल्ड्रंस फंड में डालोगे तो आपको लगेगा कि ये बच्चों के लिए इन्वेस्ट किया है, व्हिच इज सो
Yeah,
ट्रू राइट.
which actually happens.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that's a reason I'm sure these funds are available, right? I mean,
Yeah.
नहीं तो आप डाइवर्सिफाइड इक्विटी फंड में भी डाल दो, like you rightly said, एक ही बात है. So yeah, okay. So that gives me an idea कि I should invest in a children fund. All right. Okay.
Yeah, you should.
कुछ साल पहले सेबी शिफ्टेड द बेंचमार्क्स फ्रॉम प्राइस रिटर्न इंडेक्स टू अ टोटल रिटर्न इंडेक्स, एंड सिंस देन देखा जाए तो लार्ज कैप फंड्स हैव रियली बीन स्ट्रगलिंग टू आउटपरफॉर्म द बेंचमार्क. तो अगर देखा जाए तो अबाउट 80% ऑफ जो एक्टिवली मैनेज्ड लार्ज कैप फंड्स हैं, they have really struggled to give returns better than the index or the benchmark index in the over the past few years. तो आपकी ओपिनियन में does it still make sense to invest in large cap funds, to have large cap funds in one's portfolio, and एक high performer large cap fund को कैसे identify करें?
So let me start with the good news again, which is that this trend is changing.
Okay.
And I have a reason why I'm saying this. Uh, in the last 6 to 12 months, the percentage funds which in large cap category, which have started outperforming the benchmark index, is pretty high now. Actually, it's a cyclical pattern. In fact, what I have noticed and in my experience, what we have seen is that whenever there is the market movement is very skewed towards one particular sector or one particular group of businesses, uh, उस पीरियड में active fund managers who are managing pure large cap funds tend to underperform. And whenever broad basing of the market happens, जहाँ पे options और बहुत सारे सेक्टर्स एक साथ परफॉर्म करने लगते हैं जब इकोनॉमी ठीक करने लगता है, उस पीरियड में एक्टिव मैनेजर्स टेंड टू डू वेल.
Okay.
So give you an example, between let's say 2018 and 2021, uh, if you look at the performance of various sectors, it was largely IT and commodities as a sector.
Okay.
उस पीरियड में ये दो सेक्टर आउटपरफॉर्म डिस्प्रोपोर्शनेटली. And normally a large cap fund manager who is an active fund manager in line with the benchmark index will have, let's say, 14-15 sectors, or let's say more than 10 sectors in his portfolio with no particular skewness to one sector. So ऐसे टाइम पे I have seen, at least I have noticed, and between 18 to 21 actually happened, where the benchmark index did better than most of the large cap fund managers.
Yeah.
Incrementally, what we are seeing, and which is what I was giving you that example, market has broadened. There are more sectors which have started doing well, and it is. And the other thing that you should note is that, let's say, compared to BSE Sensex as a benchmark index, BSE Sensex has today more than three stocks, or let's say three stocks today, which are more than 10% weightage in a benchmark index.
Yeah.
Whereas a active manager in the mutual fund space is, because of regulation, and I think rightly so, cannot buy more than 10% in any stock in the fund.
Yeah.
So those various reasons do make short term performances to go bad, or be lower than normal. Uh, but I think this trend is changing, as I'm saying. And if economy continues to do well, if our earnings for corporates can grow at healthy double digits incrementally in the next couple of years, which my expectation is, I think this trend can continue to be positive towards active manager. But let's see. Ultimately, it's all about stock selection. So if a fund manager is doing a right stock selection,
Yeah.
then performance can come. We'll have to monitor this space. It's not a bad space. I think fund investors, if you choose the right fund manager who in turn chooses the right stocks, our performance can come.
Yeah. So that was my question, right? How do you identify the performers? So is it just based on the past performance? Yeah, there are certain parameters that we can look at.
Yeah, unfortunately, in this space, the longer the past performance that you have, the
Okay.
better chances of that fund manager to do well in future. Other than that, unfortunately, you don't have too many parameters to look at, because it's the experience that counts.
Okay.
The reason why you fund managers who have more than 20 years experience gets better recognized in the market is because they have proven themselves over long periods of time.
Sure.
बीच में every fund manager underperformed, but ultimately they have proven themselves. And hence, my bet would be that the longer the tenure of the fund manager, if the history is there, if he or she has done a good job in a very long period of time consistently, then there is no reason why in the next 3 5 years he or she will not do well. So
Okay.
that's a good criteria to look at.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay. So I think the next question is again something related to the benchmarks. I think देखा जाए तो index funds in itself are a big rage. बहुत सारे investors आजकल index funds पे भी काफी invest कर रहे हैं. काफी AMCs जो हैं वो mid cap and small cap benchmark के ऊपर index funds create कर रहे हैं. So how relevant are these index funds, especially for say जो first time investors होते हैं, and कैसे तरीके के index funds के साथ एक investor अपनी journey शुरू कर सकते हैं?
So, and so index funds, I would say everything has a role to play. So, as I said, for example, let's take the example of the previous question. There are times जहाँ पे index funds tend to do better. It's a cyclical pattern. In fact, in my experience of the last 22 years being in the market, is that uh, every 7 8 years you find cycles turning, and sometimes index funds does well, sometimes active managers do well.
Yeah,
So again, goal seeking, asset allocation, the same question comes in, the point comes on again and again, is that आप आपके portfolio में when you do asset allocation, it makes sense to have some allocation to index funds as well. And largely my suggestion is that index funds today, which which have seen which have been very time tested over the years,
yeah,
which is, let's say, the large cap index funds, they make more sense being a part of your asset allocation. uh, in जो स्मॉल कैप मिड कैप असेट इंडेक्स फंड्स अभी जो हैं, they have undergone a change very recently. And when I say this, I would what I mean by that is that 2018 में definition of large mid and small got
yes,
revised and confirmed. And since then हर 6 महीने में ये definition रिवाइज होता है. And in line with that, index funds जो मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप के जो इंडेक्स इंडिसेस हैं, they have been in the process of getting revised, and these are very new in that sense. So मुझे लगता है इसको थोड़ा साल देना चाहिए. Once they get a history of, let's say, 5 10 years, उसके बाद one can start looking at mid cap or small cap indices more favorably.
sure,
Till that time, large cap indices are better to focus on. The last thing that I would say is that in the small cap space, generally, given that illiquidity is high, uh, size matters even in index funds. So it's not only true for active funds. So if index funds were to grow in a larger manner in size in small cap, it will become a very difficult animal to manage in that sense. So even that one should keep in mind. फिलहाल तो these are small index for small size index funds. So early days, but these 2 points people should note.
सो वी कैन कॉन्फिडेंटली से कि अगर आपको स्मॉल कैप में इन्वेस्ट करना है तो इन्वेस्ट इन एक्टिवली मैनेज फंड वर्सेस एन इंडेक्स फंड दैट वुड बी अ फेयर स्टेटमेंट टू मेक
Which you can see from the performance as well.
व्हिच यू
Yeah.
कैन सी
So
फ्रॉम द
it's just that अभी नए नए indices बन रहे हैं, इतना हिस्ट्री नहीं है,
अच्छा
and hence the whole composition of the index funds in small cap and mid cap is yet to see the stability that we want to see.
अच्छा सो यू नो हमने मतलब चंद्रप्रकाश इतने सारे कैटेगरीज के बारे में डिस्कस किया वी स्पोक अबाउट स्मॉल कैप मिड कैप लार्ज कैप आपने थोड़ा हमें मल्टी कैप के बारे में बताया वी स्पोक अबाउट सेक्टरल फंड्स एंड यू नो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स so now I think one category that we've missed out is the hybrid funds category and I think that in itself is a good category of course and you know बहुत सारे investors hybrid funds में भी invest करना चाहते हैं लेकिन now there's a viable alternative to hybrid funds which is bank fixed deposits considering उसमें भी अभी इंटरेस्ट रेट्स काफ़ी अच्छे मिल रहे हैं सो स्पेशली आफ्टर यू नो जो चेंज हुआ है इन द लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन्स टैक्सेशन फॉर डेट म्यूचुअल फंड्स हाउ रेलिवेंट आर हाइब्रिड फंड्स एज अ कैटेगरी एंड ये जो लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन्स का जो बेनिफिट था ऑफ डेट फंड्स विच यूज टू किक इन यू नो पोस्ट 3 years ऑफ होल्डिंग सो यू नो व्हाट डू यू थिंक एज एन इन्वेस्टर हमें क्या करना चाहिए you know FDs hybrid funds what should be my take
So again, this is a cyclical pattern that you always see is that interest rates don't remain high forever.
yeah
Neither do they remain low forever. So you make a very valid point. Interest rates बढ़े हैं. FD rates have gone towards 7.5% in some cases.
yeah
So they have started competing with some of the low equity hybrid funds.
yeah
So जिस हाइब्रिड कैटेगरी जिस हाइब्रिड फंड में लो इक्विटी होता है, जैसे इक्विटी सेविंग्स
conservative
हुआ है,
hybrid yeah
काफी काफी कैटेगरीज है जहाँ पे इक्विटी एलोकेशन इज अराउंड 35%.
correct
उन कैटेगरीज में रिटर्न्स आर in some cases below high FD returns, and hence an investor will want to shift towards FD.
yeah
Uh, but FD में एक issue है is that there is a reinvestment risk.
hmm.
आप 1 साल 3 साल 5 साल के लिए एफडी करेंगे, पर 5 साल बाद जब आपका एफडी रिन्यूअल के लिए आएगा उस टाइम पे इंटरेस्ट रेट शायद से वो नहीं होगा.
yeah
सो इफ यू टेक अ लॉन्गर टर्म व्यू, आई थिंक hybrid as a category, even the lower equity hybrid as a category makes sense. If you take a 10, 15, 20 year view, uh, there is a very large part, a larger part of hybrid as a category is actually higher equity allocation,
yeah
which is around 65 to 80% equity allocation. And there, I think returns are still
reasonably
reasonably
high
stronger than the FD returns. तो वहाँ पे इन्वेस्टर्स आई थिंक विल इट मेक सेंस टू कंटिन्यू टू बी इन्वेस्टेड इन द हाइब्रिड एज अ कैटेगरी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स.
fair enough so now I think ye question we ask all our you know everyone who comes on this show so आप इतने साल से इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं यू हैड योर ओन पर्सनल इन्वेस्टमेंट जर्नी एज वेल सो कैन यू गिव अस सम लर्निंग्स फ्रॉम योर जर्नी एंड स्पेशली अगर हम आज के टाइम की मार्केट्स देखें करंट बेरिश मार्केट्स व्हाट एडवाइस वुड यू गिव टू फर्स्ट टाइम इन्वेस्टर्स
So I would say, first of all, my learning, and there are two key learnings that I would want to say. One is that our market or our entrepreneurs are changing quite significantly, which is that एक ज़माना था when I started my career, for example, in 2000, उस टाइम पे लिमिटेड बिजनेसमैन ऐसे थे जहाँ जिनके ऊपर हम लॉन्ग टर्म बेट रख सकते थे.
yeah
एंड गिवन दैट कैपिटल वाज स्कैर्स एट दैट टाइम, जो भी ग्रोथ था वो बैंक लेंडिंग से होता था. सो एंटरप्रेन्योर के पास भी मजबूरी थी कि वो लोन पे ही बिजनेस करता था. एंड वी ऑल नो फ्रॉम एक्सपीरियंस लेवरेज किल्स.
correct
सो अगर आपने बड़ा लोन लेके बिजनेस किया है और अगर डिमांड कम हो गया तो आपका लोन डिफॉल्ट होना वाजिब है. और ये बहुत बार हुआ है इंडिया में. 2000 में जब से आया हूँ, 2000, सो वी हैव हैड एटलीस्ट 2 cycles जहाँ पे बैंकिंग सेक्टर गेव लॉट ऑफ लोन्स, स्टॉक्स डिड वेरी वेल, एंड देन एनपी आया, एंड यू हैव फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम businesses were or let's say banks were providing for their past NPAs.
Sure.
But the reason I start with this point is that today capital availability is very significant. The other thing that I see is that इंडियन entrepreneurs आजकल global business की बात करते हैं, which means that they like to invest in R&D. They are innovating. They are thinking of technology. They are thinking of scaling in global markets, not only in India. Uh, and at the most important part, they've all learned that leverage can kill you, so leverage कम होना चाहिए, which means that the first learning that I have is that equity as an asset class for Indian equity investors is significantly better asset class today than it used to be 20 years back. And 20 साल में लोगों ने बहुत पैसा कमाया है, तो I'm pretty sure, at least I have this view that अगला 20 साल will probably be better than what we've seen in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Uh, so you should invest. That's the first thing. Having said this, the important thing on investing that I have learned is that focus on cash flows. uh, उन्हीं बिजनेसेस में इन्वेस्ट करिए या उन्हीं एंटरप्रेन्योर्स पे बेट करिए जो कैश फ्लो जनरेट करते हो. Growth is important, but cash flow is even more important. And if you can identify companies which can sustainably grow cash flows rather than top line and profits, I think returns can sustain and multiply significantly actually over a period of time. These are two things that I would certainly say, or actually learnings from a equity investment perspective over the last many years. Uh, and so that's I think I missed your second part of the question.
So in markets like these, अगर हम देखें तो जब volatility थोड़ा ज़्यादा रहता है तो first time investors को आप क्या advice देंगे?
Yeah. So first time investors, in fact, they are doing the right thing already, is that invest through SIP
Yeah.
and take a very long term view. And I would just repeat this. I think we are already seeing it happening, and I think it should continue. Don't try and be greedy in terms of doing taking leverage and investing. So one thing that notice, and SEBI recently has come out with that circular as well, or that data point they came out with, is that we find most investors are trying to use derivatives to make trading gains. And we all know from data that 70 or 90% plus of traders don't make money. In fact,
Yeah.
they lose money as per the latest data that we have from SEBI. So don't try to trade. Look at long term. Look at investing through SIP. Look at 10 years plus as an investment horizon. And I think you will not be disappointed from equity market.
Basically, stick to the basics.
Stick to the basics. Yes.
Sure. Okay. Any book recommendations for our equity investors? Like any good book that you think would help equity investors?
So my perspective on this is very maybe a bit different. Is that since we are looking at businesses and we are all as equity investors trying to invest in businesses to get more value from your money, we are what are we doing by investing in equity market? We are becoming a minority partner in each business that we invest in,
Yeah.
which means that we are betting that those businesses will do well, which means that our understanding of businesses needs to improve. Also we should understand more about the entrepreneur who's running the business or the CEO who's running the business. So I've been quite actively reading. So first of all, my advice in terms of reading would be that read anything and everything. The more you read, the more knowledge you get
Sure.
on diverse subjects, diverse topics. Having said this, uh, my personal preference on reading is more to read on biographies, trying to understand what entrepreneurs think, how they think, what they do. So there is this, instead of giving you a book suggestion, let me give you a different thought. There is this very good podcast that has been recently started by this company named as The Ken,
Hmm.
and the podcast name is First Principles, where different entrepreneurs are called on for those podcast, and it's generally 1.5 to 2 hours session with each person. And amazing, good sessions that I have been seeing. These are unlisted names though, but at least you get to see what is happening or how entrepreneurs think today in our markets, even though it's a startup ecosystem. And so these are something that I do at least in my free time.
Okay.
I try and listen to various views on what entrepreneurs are doing and how they behave. But one book that I must advise people to read, not related to investment, at least I liked it recently. I've read this book again recently. Is the autobiography of Mr. Kurian, Dr. Kurian actually, who started the cooperative movement in
Yeah.
India. I too had a dream. Amazing thought process, how he created milk, uh, or how we created the cooperative ecosystem in the country during early days of our independence. I think that's a good book to read.
Sure. Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chandraprakash. We had a great time conversing with you. I'm sure our viewers are going to love this episode. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, what a wonderful and engaging conversation that was with Mr. Padiyar. I'm sure आप सबको ये एपिसोड बहुत अच्छा लगा होगा and I'm sure you guys are waiting for the next one. So quickly जो भी हमने पॉइंट्स डिस्कस किए ना मैं जल्दी से आपके लिए समराइज कर देती हूँ. तो सबसे पहले हमने ये डिस्कस किया कि इंडिया का जो रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन है that touched a 15-month low of 5.66% in the month of March 2023. तो ये जो आरबीआई की जो पॉलिसी है विच इज टारगेटिंग इन्फ्लेशन, क्या इसकी वजह से इक्विटी मार्केट बाउंस बैक कर सकती है? तो मिस्टर परियार सेज कि आरबीआई जो इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ा रहा है टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन एंड कम टू लुक एट इट, भले ग्रोथ थोड़ी स्लो है लेकिन अब इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल में है और ये जो है इकोनॉमी के लिए लॉन्ग टर्म के लिए अच्छी बात है. फिर हमने थोड़ा एसआईपी कंट्रीब्यूशन के बारे में बात करी, वे भी डिस्कस की. अगर देखा जाए तो इन द मंथ ऑफ मार्च 2023 जो ओवरऑल एसआईपी कंट्रीब्यूशन था दैट स्टूड एट 14,276 crores एज कम्पेयर टू फेब जहाँ पे एसआईपी कंट्रीब्यूशन था 13,686 crores, जहाँ एसआईपी कंट्रीब्यूशन टच्ड क्रॉस 14,000 mark, 14,000 crore mark for the first time ever. सो मिस्टर परियार सेज कि भले ही मार्केट थोड़ी फ्लैट है लेकिन लोगों ने अपनी एसआईपीज अभी बंद नहीं करी हैं इन इक्विटी फंड्स क्योंकि जनरली पीपल हैव अ पॉजिटिव आउटलुक टुवर्ड्स इक्विटी इन द लॉन्ग टर्म. फिर हमने थोड़ा कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स के बारे में डिस्कस किया और जो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स होते हैं क्या वो एक इन्वेस्टर के कोर पोर्टफोलियो का हिस्सा बन सकते हैं. तो मिस्टर परियार सेज कि जो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स होते हैं वो बेसिकली इक्विटी फंड्स होते हैं जो करंट मार्केट ट्रेंड्स या सेंटिमेंट्स के अगेंस्ट बेट करते हैं. तो कॉन्ट्रा फंड्स में अगर आप इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं तो आपका जो टाइम होराइजन है वो लॉन्ग टर्म होना चाहिए एंड एज एन इन्वेस्टर आपको बहुत पेशेंस होना चाहिए. एंड क्योंकि ये हाई रिस्क हाई रिवॉर्ड फंड्स माने जाते हैं तो ये आपके सैटेलाइट पोर्टफोलियो का हिस्सा होने चाहिए. फिर इसके बाद हमने थोड़ा ये भी डिस्कस किया कि एक इन्वेस्टर जो रिटायरमेंट के लिए इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं तो क्या उनको म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए या एनपीएस में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए. तो मिस्टर परियार सेज कि देखा जाए तो एनपीएस अच्छा प्रोडक्ट माना जाता है क्योंकि टैक्स बेनिफिट्स भी होते हैं प्लस उनकी फीस भी काफ़ी कम होती है. लेकिन जो है एक इन्वेस्टर के पोर्टफोलियो में जो रिटायरमेंट के लिए इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं उसमें आप म्यूचुअल फंड्स और एनपीएस दोनों में इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं लेकिन थोड़ी हायर एलोकेशन म्यूचुअल फंड्स को होनी चाहिए एज कम्पेयर टू एनपीएस. फिर हमने थोड़ा फार्मा और आईटी सेक्टर फंड्स के बारे में डिस्कस किया. मिस्टर परियार सेज कि अगर आपको फार्मा या आईटी सेक्टर फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट करना है देन टाइम ऑफ एंट्री एंड एग्जिट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू मैक्सिमाइज योर रिटर्न्स. और इन फंड्स में अगर आप इन्वेस्ट करें तो आपके पास बहुत ज़्यादा पेशेंस होनी चाहिए, अदरवाइज डाइवर्सिफाइड इक्विटी फंड्स आर अ बेटर चॉइस. फिर हमने थोड़ा चिल्ड्रंस म्यूचुअल फंड्स के बारे में डिस्कस किया एंड आर दे अ गुड ऑप्शन. तो मिस्टर परियार सेज कि जो चिल्ड्रंस म्यूचुअल फंड्स होते हैं वो सोल्यूशन ओरिएंटेड फंड्स होते हैं जो इक्विटी और डेट दोनों इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं एंड दे हैव अ लॉक इन ऑफ 5 years. लेकिन ये फंड्स एक परसेप्शन क्रिएट करते हैं इन द माइंड्स ऑफ द पेरेंट्स कि ये फंड्स आप उनकी एजुकेशन के लिए या आप उनकी शादी के लिए बचा रहे हैं, जिसकी वजह से एक पॉजिटिव माइंडसेट क्रिएट होता है और पेरेंट्स जो है जनरली इन फंड्स को फिर लॉन्ग टर्म के लिए होल्ड करके रखते हैं. फिर हमने थोड़ा इंडेक्स फंड्स के बारे में बात करी एंड वी स्पोक अबाउट द इंडेक्स फंड्स दैट ट्रैक मिड कैप या स्मॉल कैप इंडिसेस और ऐसे फंड्स के अच्छे इन्वेस्टमेंट्स माने जाते हैं. तो मिस्टर परियार सेज कि देखिए किसी सिनारियो में इंडेक्स फंड्स अच्छा करते हैं, किसी सिनारियो में एक्टिव फंड्स अच्छा करते हैं. लेकिन अगर एक इन्वेस्टर को एक इंडेक्स फंड में डालना ही है तो दे शुड इन्वेस्ट इन सच इंडेक्स फंड्स जो या तो निफ्टी 50 या सेंसेक्स को ट्रैक कर रहे हैं एज कम्पेयर टू दोज फंड्स दैट आर ट्रैकिंग अ मिड कैप और अ स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स. द रीजन इज कि ये फंड्स अभी काफी नए हैं और इनकी परफॉर्मेंस को अभी गेज करना है इन द लॉन्ग टर्म. फिर हमने मिस्टर परियार से उनकी लर्निंग्स के बारे में पूछा इन द इक्विटी स्पेस एंड मिस्टर परियार सेज कि एज एन इन्वेस्टर जितना जल्दी आप इन्वेस्टमेंट शुरू कर सके उतना बेटर रहता है. एक डिसिप्लिन अप्रोच होनी चाहिए इन्वेस्टमेंट्स के लिए और आपका जो टाइम होराइजन है इक्विटी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स के लिए वो लॉन्ग टर्म होना चाहिए. ही ऑल्सो सेड कि जो फर्स्ट टाइम इन्वेस्टर्स होते हैं दे शुड स्टिक टू द बेसिक्स. उनको ट्रेडिंग नहीं करनी चाहिए एंड एट द सेम टाइम कभी भी बोरो नहीं करना चाहिए टू मेक योर इन्वेस्टमेंट. फिर हमने मिस्टर परियार से उनसे कुछ बुक रिकमेंडेशंस मांगी हैं. मिस्टर परियार सेज कि आप जितना ज़्यादा पढ़ेंगे आपको उतनी ज़्यादा नॉलेज आएगी. So he recommends a good podcast like the Can First Principles podcast, जिसमें they have candid conversations with India's big entrepreneurs and leaders, where they try to understand about these leaders' operating principles, philosophies, and worldviews. He also recommends a book I Too Had a Dream by Dr. Verghese Kurian, who is the architect of Operation Flood, which is the world's largest dairy development program. So that was it about in this particular episode. I hope all of you had a great time listening to this conversation and I'm sure you guys are waiting for the next episode. So please do keep watching, do like this episode, of course subscribe to the Groww Mutual Fund channel and do share this with everyone. Thank you so much for watching.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.